political scene in America was already buzzing with tension. Conversations around policies, scandals, and power plays dominated the news. But one day, something happened that turned the heat up even higher. It all started when a former president decided to take things into his own hands and his words to make a bold statement. It was early morning when the tweet dropped. You know the kind, short, sharp, and impossible to ignore. The message came from none other than Donald Trump, who had been keeping himself busy on social media since leaving office. His latest post wasn't about golf or rallies this time. Instead, it targeted someone very specific. That someone was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, better known as AOC, a fiery young congresswoman whose progressive ideas often clashed with Trump's views. Trump's tweet accused AOC of treasonous behavior. He claimed her recent comments during a heated congressional hearing were nothing short of an attack on American values. And just like that, he didn't stop there. In true Trump fashion, he added fuel to the fire by saying, "If I were still in office, I'd have her locked up faster than you can say Green New Deal." Now, if you're familiar with politics, you'll know that threats, or perceived threats like these, are not uncommon. People might dismiss them as dramatic or over the top. But this time felt different. This wasn't just another battle between two opposing sides, it felt personal. The idea of jailing a sitting member of Congress. That's not something you hear every day. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Supporters of Trump cheered him on, praising what they saw as a strong stance against someone they viewed as too radical for their taste. On the flip side, AOC's supporters rallied behind her, calling Trump's words dangerous and inflammatory. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags, memes, and debates. Everyone wanted to weigh in. But here's where things got interesting. While the world waited for AOC's response, she stayed silent. Not a single tweet, Instagram story, or public statement came from her camp. Hours turned into a full day, and still, nothing. Her silence spoke volumes, though, not in the way her team might have hoped. Critics jumped at the chance to call her out. They said her lack of response showed weakness, that maybe Trump's words had hit harder than anyone expected. Others speculated that she was strategizing, trying to figure out how to counter such a bold move without making things worse. Whatever the reason, the longer she stayed quiet, the more people began to wonder, was she shaken? Meanwhile, Trump kept the momentum going. He retweeted messages from fans who supported his stance, shared clips of interviews where he doubled down on his accusations and made sure everyone knew he wasn't backing down. Every interview he gave seemed to add another layer to the drama. He painted himself as the protector of American ideals, while portraying AOC as someone who needed to be stopped, at any cost. Back in Washington, whispers filled the halls of Congress. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle couldn't help but discuss the situation. Some privately admitted they admired Trump's ability to command attention, while others expressed concern about the tone of his rhetoric. One thing was clear. This confrontation wasn't just about policy anymore. It was about power, ego, and who could come out on top. As the days passed, the tension only grew thicker. AOC's team finally released a brief statement saying she would address the issue soon, but no date was given. Her supporters clung to hope, reminding everyone of her track record as a fighter for justice and equality. But even they couldn't deny the growing unease. Had Trump found a way to rattle one of the most outspoken leaders of the Democratic Party? And so the stage was set for what promised to be a showdown unlike any other. Would AOC rise to meet the challenge, or would Trump's relentless pressure prove too much? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. The eyes of the nation were firmly fixed on this unfolding drama, eager to see what would happen next. This opening chapter of the saga set the tone for everything that followed. It wasn't just about politics. It was about personalities, pride, and the timeless struggle for dominance. Little did anyone know the real fireworks were yet to come. After days of silence, the moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. AOC decided it was time to face the storm head on. She called a press conference outside Capitol Hill, a place where she often felt most comfortable addressing her supporters and critics alike. The cameras rolled, reporters jostled for position, and the air buzzed with anticipation. This was her chance to reclaim control of the narrative, to show the world that she wasn't backing down. Flanked by fellow progressive lawmakers, AOC stepped up to the podium. Her signature green jacket was replaced with a more subdued outfit, perhaps signaling seriousness. For a brief moment, everything seemed normal. She began her speech by thanking her colleagues for standing with her, and then launched into what many expected to be a fiery rebuttal. But something about her demeanor felt off. Her voice, usually so confident and commanding, wavered slightly as she spoke. She called Trump's accusations baseless and dismissed his threats as a desperate attempt to distract from his own legal troubles. Her words were sharp, but they lacked the usual passion that had made her speeches go viral in the past. Instead of rallying cries, her tone came across as defensive, almost hesitant. Reporters noticed it immediately. One journalist raised their hand and asked point blank, "Do you feel intimidated by these threats?" AOC paused. It was only for a second, but in that split second, the room went eerily quiet. When she finally responded, she sidestepped the question entirely. "We need to focus on the issues affecting everyday Americans, not get dragged into personal attacks," she said, avoiding eye contact with the crowd. That moment, just a flicker of uncertainty, was all it took. Critics pounced on it like sharks smelling blood in the water. Within hours, clips of her wavering voice and evasive answers were circulating online. Conservative commentators dissected every word, calling her response weak and unconvincing. Memes mocking her hesitation flooded social media, with captions like "shaken, not stirred" or "the great progressive crumbles." Even some moderates within her own party started whispering behind closed doors, wondering if she had lost her edge. But the real blow came later that evening during a live-streamed town hall event. AOC had organized the session to connect directly with her constituents and remind them why they supported her in the first place. At first, it seemed like a good idea, a chance to humanize herself and push back against the negative narrative building around her. But things quickly took a turn no one saw coming. Midway through the event, a man in the audience stood up and asked a pointed question. "Congresswoman," he began, "you've always talked about standing strong against bullies. Why does it seem like you're struggling now?" His tone wasn't aggressive, but it was firm. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to AOC. Everyone waited to see how she would respond. For a few seconds, she just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, instead of answering calmly or deflecting with wit, she snapped. "Are you seriously asking me that?" she shot back, her voice rising. "You sound like one of Trump's trolls planted here to provoke me." The room erupted into murmurs. Some attendees clapped in support, but others looked uncomfortable. The exchange was captured on camera, and within minutes, it was everywhere. Critics seized on the moment, accusing her of losing her cool under pressure. Late-night talk show hosts played the clip repeatedly, turning it into comedic gold. Even some allies expressed concern privately, saying she needed to find a way to regain her footing before the situation spiraled further out of control. Behind the scenes, AOC's team scrambled to contain the damage. They released statements, emphasizing her commitment to serving her constituents, and dismissed the incident as a minor hiccup. But the truth was hard to ignore. The once unstoppable force of progressive politics appeared to be faltering. Her confidence, which had once inspired millions, now seemed shaken. As the days passed, the narrative shifted even more dramatically. Polls showed a noticeable dip in her approval ratings, especially among younger voters who had previously idolized her. Meanwhile, Trump's name continued to dominate headlines, with his supporters gleefully celebrating what they saw as a major victory. Chants of "lock her up" echoed at his rallies, a chilling echo of the slogan he'd used against Hillary Clinton years earlier. AOC tried to soldier on, attending meetings and speaking engagements, but the cracks were beginning to show. Friends and colleagues noticed she seemed more withdrawn than usual, less quick to laugh or engage in lighthearted banter. It was clear the weight of the situation was taking its toll. Still, despite the challenges, AOC refused to step away completely, In interviews, she doubled down on her commitment to fighting for justice and equality. She reminded people of the policies she had championed, the Green New Deal, healthcare reform, and efforts to address income inequality. But even those reminders couldn't fully erase the doubts creeping into the minds of her supporters. The end of this chapter, the story had taken a dramatic turn. What had started as a bold confrontation between two political titans now felt like a one-sided battle. Trump appeared unstoppable, basking in the glow of renewed attention and adoration. AOC, on the other hand, seemed increasingly isolated, struggling to find solid ground amidst the chaos. Yet the fight was far from over. As history has shown time and again, politics is unpredictable. Just when it seems like someone is down for the count, they can rise again with unexpected strength. Whether AOC could pull off such a comeback remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The world was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. If there's one thing Donald Trump knows how to do, it's seize the moment, and seize it he did. With AOC's shaky response still fresh in the public's mind, Trump wasted no time turning the screws even tighter. He wasn't just content with making headlines, he wanted to dominate them. What followed was a masterclass in political theater, one that left his opponents scrambling and his supporters cheering louder than ever. The morning after AOC's press conference, Trump fired off another tweet. This one was classic Trump, short, punchy, and dripping with mockery. He dubbed her Weak Sauce Cortez, a nickname that instantly went viral. Supporters loved it, sharing memes and jokes about how she had supposedly crumbled under pressure. The phrase became a rallying cry at his rallies, with crowds chanting it alongside his usual hits like Build the Wall and Drain the Swamp. But Trump didn't stop there. Over the next few days, he appeared on nearly every conservative talk show and news outlet he could find. Each appearance was more fiery than the last. He painted himself as the ultimate defender of American values, someone who refused to back down when faced with what he called radical extremism. His message was clear. AOC wasn't just wrong, she was dangerous. She talks a big game, he told one host during a live interview, leaning forward for emphasis. But when push comes to shove, she folds like a cheap suit. You can't lead this country if you can't handle a little heat. The audience erupted in applause, hanging onto his every word. It was vintage Trump, full of bravado and bluster, but undeniably effective. Even people who didn't agree with him couldn't deny his ability to command attention. While Trump worked the media circuit, his allies in Congress got busy behind the scenes. They introduced a resolution calling for an investigation into AOC's alleged misconduct. The accusations were vague, focusing on claims of financial impropriety related to her campaign funds. Legal experts quickly dismissed the charges as baseless, arguing there was no real evidence to support them. But that didn't matter. It wasn't about facts, it was about perception. The mere suggestion of wrongdoing cast a shadow over AOC's reputation. Headlines popped up everywhere, questioning whether she had something to hide. Reporters camped outside her office, hoping to catch her coming or going. Her team issued statements denying any wrongdoing, but the damage was already done. In politics, sometimes the accusation is enough to stick regardless of its truth. Trump's supporters ate it all up. At rallies across the country, they chanted, "Lock her up," a slogan that brought back memories of his 2016 campaign against Hillary Clinton. Back then, the phrase had been directed at Clinton over her email scandal. Now it was aimed squarely at AOC. For many attendees, it felt like déjà vu, but this time, the stakes seemed higher. AOC wasn't just a politician in their eyes. She represented everything they believed was wrong with modern liberalism. Meanwhile, AOC's attempts to fight back only seemed to make things worse. She gave interviews where she tried to explain her position, but each time she stumbled over her words or came across as defensive. Her frustration was palpable, and it showed. Critics jumped on these moments, using them as proof that she couldn't handle the pressure. Late-night comedians added fuel to the fire, poking fun at her struggles in skits that millions watched. Even some moderate Democrats began distancing themselves from her. Privately, they worried that her ongoing battle with Trump might hurt the party's chances in upcoming elections. Publicly, they urged her to take a step back and let cooler heads prevail. But stepping back wasn't in AOC's DNA. She had built her career on being bold, unapologetic, and fearless. Admitting defeat, or even appearing weak, wasn't an option. Still, the toll it was taking on her was undeniable. Friends noticed she seemed more tired than usual, less quick to smile. Staff members whispered about long hours spent strategizing and re-strategizing, trying to figure out how to turn the tide. Some suggested she take a break, focus on self-care, and come back stronger. But AOC shook them off, insisting she needed to keep pushing forward. As the days turned into weeks, the narrative shifted further in Trump's favor. Media coverage leaned heavily toward his version of events, portraying him as the dominant force once again. Pundits debated whether AOC's rise had simply been a flash in the pan, a brief moment of excitement before reality set in. Others wondered if she had bitten off more than she could chew by taking on someone as seasoned and relentless as Trump. For Trump, this was exactly where he wanted to be. He thrived in chaos, feeding off controversy and conflict. Every headline, every clip, every chant at his rallies reinforced his image as a fighter who never backed down. To his supporters, he was proving yet again why he was the ultimate disruptor. To his critics, he was demonstrating the dangers of unchecked ego and ambition. And through it all, AOC found herself fighting not just Trump, but also the growing doubts within her own camp. Could she recover from this? Was she strong enough to withstand the relentless attacks? Or had she finally met her match? By the end of this chapter, the balance of power seemed firmly tilted in Trump's favor. He had taken control of the narrative, leaving AOC struggling to regain her footing. But in politics, nothing stays the same for long. Just when it seemed like Trump had won the war, whispers of resistance began to emerge. Would AOC find a way to reclaim her voice, or would Trump's counterattack prove too much to overcome? Only time would tell. The pressure was mounting, and it was starting to show. AOC, once known for her unshakable confidence and fiery speeches, now seemed like someone fighting an uphill battle with no clear path to victory. The weight of the attacks, Trump's relentless mockery, the accusations swirling around her, the chants at rallies calling for her downfall, it all added up. And while she had always prided herself on being resilient, even the strongest people have breaking points. It happened during what should have been a routine event, a live-streamed town hall meant to reconnect with her supporters. These events were usually her safe space, a chance to speak directly to the people who believed in her vision. But this time, something felt different. From the moment she sat down in front of the camera, there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. Supporters filled the virtual chat cheering her on, but so did critics armed with sharp questions and biting comments. At first, everything seemed fine. AOC began by talking about the issues that mattered most to her: climate change, healthcare, economic inequality. She spoke passionately about the need for bold action and reminded everyone why she had entered politics in the first place. For a brief moment, it looked like she might finally regain some ground. Then came the question that changed everything. A man in his late 40s, wearing a baseball cap and sitting cross-legged on his couch, appeared on screen as part of the live feed. He introduced himself as one of her constituents and then asked a simple yet loaded question. "Congresswoman, you've always talked about standing strong against bullies. Why does it seem like you're struggling so much right now?" The room froze, or at least it felt that way. For a few seconds, AOC just stared at him, her face unreadable. It wasn't anger or frustration. It was something deeper, almost like disbelief. When she finally responded, her tone shifted dramatically. Instead of answering calmly, she snapped, "Are you seriously asking me that?" She shot back, her voice rising sharply. "You sound like one of Trump's trolls planted, here to provoke me." The reaction was immediate. Some viewers clapped in support, appreciating her honesty and frustration. Others cringed, feeling uneasy about how quickly the situation had escalated. The clip went viral within minutes, spreading across social media platforms faster than anyone could contain it. Critics pounced, using the moment to paint her as unstable and unable to handle criticism. Memes mocking her outburst flooded Twitter and Instagram, turning what could have been a minor slip into a major scandal. Late-night talk shows had a field day with it. Hosts played the clip over and over, adding their own commentary and jokes. One host quipped, "Looks like the Green New Deal isn't the only thing getting heated these days." Another compared her meltdown to a reality TV drama, complete with dramatic music and exaggerated reactions. Even those who didn't watch late-night television couldn't escape the jokes. They were everywhere, from TikTok videos to Reddit threads. Behind the scenes, AOC's team scrambled to mitigate the damage. They released statements emphasizing her dedication to serving her community and dismissed the incident as a rare moment of human emotion. But the truth was hard to ignore. The image of her snapping at a constituent contradicted everything she stood for: authenticity, empathy, and strength. Her opponents seized on this contradiction, accusing her of hypocrisy and weakness. As if things weren't bad enough, protests began popping up outside her public appearances. At one event, a small group held signs that read, "Lock her up," echoing the chants from Trump's rallies. Others shouted slogans like "Weak Sauce Cortez" and "Step Down." While the protesters were outnumbered by her supporters, their presence was jarring. It was a stark reminder of how far the narrative had shifted against her. Even her colleagues in Congress started to distance themselves. Moderates within her own party quietly expressed concern, urging her to take a step back and let cooler heads prevail. Privately, they worried that her ongoing battle with Trump might hurt their chances in upcoming elections. Publicly, they avoided commenting altogether, leaving her to fend for herself. Back home, friends noticed a change in her demeanor. She seemed more withdrawn, less quick to laugh or engage in light-hearted banter. Staff members whispered about long hours spent strategizing and re-strategizing, trying desperately to figure out how to turn the tide. Some suggested she take a break, focus on self-care, and come back stronger. But AOC shook them off, insisting she needed to keep pushing forward. Despite the challenges, she refused to give up completely. In interviews, she doubled down on her commitment to fighting for justice and equality. She reminded people of the policies she had championed: the Green New Deal, healthcare reform, efforts to address income inequality. But even those reminders couldn't fully erase the doubts creeping into the minds of her supporters. Polls painted a grim picture. Her approval ratings, which had once soared among younger voters and progressives, were now dipping significantly. Meanwhile, Trump's numbers surged, buoyed by his ability to dominate headlines and frame the narrative in his favor. Chants of "Lock her up" became a staple at his rallies, energizing his base and reinforcing his image as a fighter who never backed down. By the end of this chapter, it was clear that AOC was losing the battle, not just with Trump, but with public perception. What had started as a clash between two political titans had turned into a one-sided war. Trump appeared unstoppable, basking in the glow of renewed attention and adoration. AOC, on the other hand, seemed increasingly isolated, struggling to find solid ground amidst the chaos. Yet, despite the setbacks, whispers of resistance began to emerge. Friends and allies urged her to regroup, reminding her that every politician faces tough moments. They pointed to past leaders who had stumbled, but eventually risen again, stronger than ever. Could AOC do the same? Or had she finally met her match? The world watched and waited, eager to see what would happen next. Would she find a way to reclaim her voice, or would Trump's counterattack prove too much to overcome? Only time would tell. Desperation can make people do extraordinary things. For AOC, the breaking point had come. She knew she couldn't keep fighting this battle on Trump's terms. It was time to take back control of her story. With her team working overtime and her resolve hardened, she announced a bold move: a nationwide tour titled "Standing Strong for America." This wasn't just another campaign stop or press conference. It was a full-blown effort to remind voters who she was and what she stood for. The plan was simple but ambitious. Over the course of several weeks, AOC would travel across the country, visiting key cities and towns where her message of progressive change resonated most deeply. At each stop, She'd hold rallies, town halls, and meet and greets with everyday Americans. Her goal? To shift the conversation away from personal attacks and back to the issues that mattered: climate justice, healthcare reform, economic equality, and grassroots activism. To bolster her efforts, she brought along some heavy hitters. Progressive. Icons like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren joined her at select events, lending their credibility and star power to the cause. Together, they painted a vision of a better future, one rooted in compassion, fairness, and bold action. The optics were powerful. Three leaders standing shoulder to shoulder, united in their mission to challenge the status quo. At first, the tour seemed promising. Crowds showed up in droves, eager to hear AOC speak. In places like Detroit, Milwaukee, and Portland, thousands gathered to cheer her on, waving signs that read, "We stand with AOC," and chanting slogans about hope and resilience. During these moments, it felt like she was reclaiming her footing. Her speeches were fiery and heartfelt, filled with the kind of passion that had made her a household name in the first place. She talked openly about the challenges she faced, not just from Trump, but from critics within her own party and even some members of the media. "They want me to crumble," she told one crowd in Chicago, "but I'm not going anywhere, because this isn't about me. It's about you. It's about us. And as long as we stand together, no one can silence us." Her words struck a chord with many attendees, especially younger voters who saw her as a symbol of resistance against an outdated system. Supporters left these events feeling reinvigorated, ready to defend her and spread her message. Social media buzzed with positive reactions, and for a brief moment it seemed like AOC might actually be turning the tide. But the road to redemption is rarely smooth, and AOC's journey was no exception. As the tour progressed, cracks began to show. Not everywhere was as welcoming as those early stops. In cities like Dallas and Atlanta, protesters showed up in force, holding signs that mocked her struggles and echoed Trump's rhetoric. Some heckled her during speeches, shouting phrases like "weak sauce Cortez" and "step down." Others tried to drown out her supporters' chants with boos and jeers. One particularly heated exchange occurred in Houston, where a group of counter-protesters clashed with AOC's supporters outside the venue. Tensions ran high, with both sides trading insults and accusations. Inside, AOC did her best to stay focused, delivering a passionate speech about unity and perseverance. But the disruption outside cast a shadow over the event, reminding everyone how polarizing this fight had become. Even worse were the incidents that played out behind closed doors. At several stops, AOC found herself overwhelmed by the sheer scale of hostility she encountered. Friends noticed she was quieter than usual after certain events, retreating to hotel rooms to decompress. Staff members whispered about her growing exhaustion, urging her to slow down before she burned out completely. But AOC refused to listen. She believed giving up, even temporarily, would only validate her critics' claims that she couldn't handle the pressure. Media coverage of the tour reflected its mixed success. While outlets highlighted the enthusiasm of her supporters, they also zeroed in on the protests and disruptions. Critics seized on these moments, using them to argue that AOC's influence was waning. Late-night comedians continued their barrage of jokes, poking fun at everything from her attempts to rally crowds to the awkward encounters she sometimes had with skeptical constituents. Perhaps the most telling sign of trouble came in the form of polling data. Despite her best efforts, AOC's approval ratings remained stubbornly low among key demographics. Even progressives who once idolized her admitted privately that her recent struggles had dimmed their enthusiasm. Moderates, meanwhile, viewed her as too divisive, a liability rather than an asset heading into future elections. By the end of the tour, AOC returned to Washington physically and emotionally drained. The experience had been grueling, testing her strength and resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. While there were glimmers of hope, moments when she felt genuinely connected to the people she served, the overall picture was sobering. The narrative surrounding her hadn't shifted as much as she'd hoped. If anything, Trump's dominance in the headlines had only grown stronger. Back in Congress, whispers circulated about her future. Some suggested she consider stepping away from the spotlight for a while, allowing the dust to settle before making another push. Others floated the idea of shifting her focus to behind-the-scenes work, where she could still advocate for her policies without facing constant scrutiny. AOC listened to these suggestions quietly, weighing her options carefully. In private conversations, close friends reminded her that setbacks are part of any political career. They pointed to other leaders, who had stumbled only to rise again stronger than ever. "This isn't the end," one confidant told her. "It's just a chapter. You've got more chapters to write." AOC nodded, absorbing their words. Deep down, she knew they were right. She had always been a fighter, someone who refused to back down in the face of adversity. But this battle with Trump had tested her like nothing else before. Whether she could find a way to truly reclaim her voice, or if the damage was too great to undo, remained uncertain. As the dust settled and the nation moved on to the next big headline, one thing was clear. The drama between AOC and Trump wasn't over. It was merely paused, waiting for the next twist in this ongoing saga. And though AOC had fought valiantly to prove her resilience, the question lingered. Was it enough to turn the tide, or had she reached her limit? Only time would tell. The dust had settled, but the scars remained. The nationwide tour, AOC's grand attempt at redemption, had come and gone, leaving behind a mixed legacy. While she had managed to rally her base in some areas, the cracks in her armor were undeniable. Critics continued to pounce. Media narratives leaned heavily against her, and even some allies began questioning whether she could recover from the beating she'd taken. Meanwhile, Trump stood tall, basking in the glow of what many called his greatest political victory yet. It wasn't just about the rallies or the tweets anymore. Trump had proven once again that he was a master manipulator, a man who thrived on chaos and controversy. Every move he made seemed calculated to keep AOC off balance, forcing her to play defense instead of offense. And it worked. By the time the final whistle blew, AOC looked less like the fearless progressive icon she once was and more like someone struggling to stay afloat in a sea of relentless attacks. Trump wasted no time capitalizing on his perceived win. He held a massive rally in Florida, drawing thousands of supporters eager to see their leader celebrate another triumph. As he walked onto the stage, the crowd erupted into cheers so loud they drowned out the music playing over the speakers. Chants of "USA, USA" filled the air, along with the now familiar refrain of "Lock her up." It was clear. This was Trump's moment, and he intended to savor every second of it. Taking the microphone, Trump launched into one of his signature speeches, a mix of bravado, humor, and thinly veiled threats. He mocked AOC mercilessly, calling her weak sauce Cortez yet again and claiming her inability to fight back proved she wasn't cut out for leadership. She talks big, but when it comes to standing strong, she crumbles faster than a sandcastle. At high tide, he quipped, earning roars of laughter from the audience. But it wasn't all jokes. Trump also used the opportunity to position himself as the ultimate defender of American values. He painted AOC as a symbol of everything wrong, with modern liberalism, someone who cared more about radical ideas than practical solutions. "We need leaders who can handle pressure, not cowards who fold under fire," he declared, pointing a finger dramatically at the crowd. The message was simple but effective. Trump was strong, while AOC was weak. End of story. The speech quickly went viral, dominating headlines for days. Clips of Trump's performance played endlessly on cable news, social media feeds lit up with reactions, and late-night comedians added fresh material to their routines. Even those who didn't support him couldn't deny his ability to command attention. Love him or hate him, Trump knew how to put on a show, and this rally was no exception. For AOC, the aftermath was brutal. She returned to Washington quieter than usual, avoiding interviews and public appearances as much as possible. Friends noticed she seemed withdrawn, spending long hours alone in her office or walking through quiet parts of Capitol Hill. Staff members whispered about her declining enthusiasm, wondering if the constant barrage of criticism had finally worn her down. Some suggested she take a step back, focus on policy work, and let the storm pass. But others worried she might be considering something bigger, an exit from the spotlight altogether. Behind closed doors, sources close to AOC revealed that she was grappling with a difficult decision. Should she continue fighting, knowing full well the odds were stacked against her? Or should she step aside, allowing newer voices to take center stage? These were questions she wrestled with daily, often losing sleep over them. Her team urged her to think long-term, reminding her that politics is a marathon, not a sprint. But deep down, AOC knew the damage had already been done. Whether fair or not, perceptions matter, and right now hers was that of someone who couldn't withstand the heat. Meanwhile, moderate Democrats seized the opportunity to push their own agenda. With AOC sidelined, they argued that the party needed to pivot toward more centrist policies if it hoped to win future elections. They pointed to polling data showing declining support among swing voters, blaming much of it on AOC's highly visible struggles. Progressives fought back, accusing moderates of abandoning their principles for short-term gains. The infighting only added fuel to the fire, further fracturing an already divided party. As weeks turned into months, AOC slowly faded from the national conversation. Once a household name synonymous with bold ideas and grassroots activism, she now found herself relegated to the sidelines. Lawmakers who had once sought her endorsement avoided mentioning her name altogether. Media outlets shifted their focus to other rising stars within the Democratic Party, leaving her largely ignored. Even her social media presence, which had once been a hub of engagement and excitement, grew quieter, with fewer posts and less interaction. Yet despite her diminished role, AOC refused to disappear completely. In Congress, she continued advocating for the policies she believed in, working tirelessly behind the scenes to advance legislation on climate change, healthcare, and economic inequality. Though her voice carried less weight than before, she remained committed to making a difference, even if it meant doing so quietly. For Trump, the victory served as yet another reminder of his unparalleled ability to dominate headlines and crush opponents. His supporters viewed him as untouchable, a political genius capable of outmaneuvering anyone who dared challenge him. Critics, meanwhile, saw his tactics as dangerous, a slippery slope toward authoritarianism. Regardless of where people stood, one thing was certain: Trump had proven once again that he was a force to be reckoned with. The saga between AOC and Trump ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. What had started as a clash of titans became a cautionary tale about power, perception, and the unpredictable nature of politics. For AOC, it was a humbling experience, one that forced her to confront her vulnerabilities and rethink her approach. For Trump, it was validation of his instincts and strategies, reinforcing his belief that fear and intimidation are powerful tools in the game of politics. In the end, the story left lingering questions. Was AOC's rise simply a fleeting moment in American history, a bright spark destined to burn out quickly? Or could she find a way to reinvent herself and reclaim her place at the forefront of progressive politics? Only time would tell. But one thing was clear: the battle between these two figures had reshaped the landscape of American politics, leaving an indelible mark on both sides of the aisle. As the nation moved on to the next big drama, pundits debated what lessons could be learned from this chapter. Some argued it highlighted the dangers of personality-driven politics, where egos overshadow issues. Others saw it as proof that resilience matters, that surviving setbacks is just as important as achieving victories. Whatever the takeaway, one truth remained undeniable. In the world of politics, nothing stays static for long. New players will emerge, old battles will reignite, and the cycle will continue. And so, the curtain fell on this particular act, leaving audiences eager to see what came next. Would AOC rise again, stronger and wiser? Or would Trump maintain his grip on the narrative, shaping the future according to his vision? The answers lay somewhere in the uncertain horizon of tomorrow, a horizon shaped by ambition, determination, and the unyielding pursuit of power,